If you grew up on the south shore of Montreal or, honestly, in any major North American suburb, you know the Panama parking lot.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just a parking lot,
Right.
it felt like a geographical feature, just this vast, gray ocean of asphalt.
A total concrete sea?
Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
drive in, fight for a spot in, like Section Z, trek across the frozen tundra in February, and then you'd catch the 45 bus into downtown.
Right, it was the quintessential park and ride, basically a place designed entirely for cars to sleep while their owners went somewhere else to actually live their lives.
Right. But we aren't talking about parking today. We are talking about the complete erasure of that landscape.
Which is huge.
It is. Today we're doing a deep dive into the Panama sector in Brossard, Quebec. And looking at the reports we pulled from wikiresidence.ca and infodrone.ca, this isn't just a renovation project. It's a complete philosophical pivot.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We are watching a city try to surgically implant a downtown core right into the middle of a 1970s suburb.
Surgical is definitely the right word there because, honestly, this is messy. It's what urban planners are calling a laboratory for smart densification.
Right.
Because the mission here is to take a transit hub, which, let's face it, is usually the ugliest part of any suburb, usually defined by highway noise, exhaust, chain link fences.
Totally.
And they want to turn that into a complete living environment.
And the catalyst for all this, the thing that makes this even remotely possible, is the REM, the Réseau Express Metropolitain.
Exactly.
We're going to explore how that light rail system is transforming this from a place you just pass through into a place you might never actually want to leave.
The stakes are incredibly high here for urban planning. This is really a test case. If Brossard can pull this off, if they can shift the priority from the vehicle to the human in a heavy traffic corridor like this, it basically proves that the suburb as we know it is evolving into something else entirely.
So let's get into the weeds. We have a lot of documentation here on everything from the height of the towers, the cost of the sewers, to the actual social engineering at play.
Let's dive in.
So usually when we talk about these kinds of massive infrastructure projects, we throw around the acronym TOD, Transit-Oriented Development.
Right.
And usually that concept is pretty cookie cutter. You just build density near a train station.
Hmm.
But looking at the Panama sector plans, it feels different. You're not building a TOD in a green field where you have a blank slate.
No, not at all. And that is exactly the challenge here. This is what we call retrofit TOD.
Retrofit TOD.
Right. You are trying to retrofit walkability into an area that was fundamentally hostile to pedestrians for 50 years. The standard TOD definition is pretty simple. You build compact living environments within roughly 500 to 800 meters of a high-performance transit station.
Okay, but here that 800-meter radius is currently crossed by Taschereau Boulevard, which is basically a highway interface, and just acres and acres of commercial strip malls.
It's an engineering nightmare, frankly. You can't just drop a shiny new condo tower next to the REM and call it a day.
Right, because the only thing you can walk to is the train. That's not a neighborhood.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
dormitory.
A dormitory.
That is the core distinction here. A dormitory is where you sleep and leave. A TOD is where you stay. So the Panama application of this rests on three pillars that we're seeing outlined in the master plan. First, obviously, is compactness.
Because you have to stop the sprawl.
You have to. You cannot justify a multi-billion-dollar electric light rail system if everyone is still living on quarter-acre lots. It just doesn't work.
Which brings us to the second pillar I saw in the reports, which is the mix of uses. The zoning they are planning here is aggressive.
Very.
It's not just residential. They are effectively banning the idea of single-use zoning within that immediate bubble.
Right, because the goal is that 15-minute neighborhood concept. You want offices, shops, public spaces, and homes all stacked together. And then the third pillar is active mobility. And honestly, this is the hardest one to pull off in Brossard.
Yeah, but
You have to convince people who have literally driven everywhere for 40 years to suddenly walk or bike.
and to do that, you have to make the walk not suck.
Bluntly put, yes. You have to widen the sidewalks, add protected bike paths, and create an actual sense of place so that walking to the station feels like a stroll, not a punishing commute.
So let's talk about what this actually looks like physically on the ground, because the scale is startling. We're looking at a partnership between developers, Prével, and TGTA. They got their master plan approved back in June 2024.
Yes, this is the flagship project. They're calling it Panama Brossard.
And it is massive. I mean, we were talking about roughly 1,776 units.
That's a small town.
Literally being dropped onto a parking lot.
Yeah, and Phase A1 is kicking off soon, with construction slated for around 2026.
I was looking at the specs for this first tower, and it is a beast.
Ah.
30 stories.
Yeah.
For context for you listening, in downtown Montreal, 30 stories is completely normal. In Brossard, next to a highway interface, that is a massive landmark.
It creates a skyline where there absolutely wasn't one before. But looking at the breakdown of that specific tower, it's doing exactly what we just discussed regarding mixed use. It's got about 325 residential units, but it also has 8,900 square meters of office space
Wow.
and ground floor retail.
So the vertical integration is real here. You could realistically live on floor 25, work your corporate job on floor 4, and buy your groceries on floor 1.
In theory, yes. But here is the friction point with all of this. If you just build 30-story concrete towers in a sea of asphalt, you create a heat island that is just miserable to live in during the summer.
Right.
You need relief.
And this is where the green lung comes in. The documents reference a Central Park project. And I have to admit, when I first read Central Park in the brief, I rolled my eyes a bit.
Because every developer promises a park.
Exactly. Every condo brochure has a rendering of happy people in a park that ends up being a patch of dead grass. But the inspiration they cite here is really specific. They cite the Martin Luther King Park in Paris.
And that reference is crucial to understand. It's not just name-dropping Paris for prestige. The Martin Luther King Park in the Clichy-Batignolles district was built on old rail yards and industrial zones.
Yeah.
It was a project specifically designed to reclaim what planners call mineralized land, basically paved, industrial, dead land, and turn it into a living biodiversity corridor.
So they using it as a literal template for depaving the Panama sector.
Precisely. They are acknowledging that this area right now is currently about 90% bitumen. The green lung isn't just a decorative patch of grass. It's an active strategy to cool down the neighborhood and manage rainwater runoff.
That makes sense.
It's the social heart. If you want families to actually live in 30-story towers, you have to give them a backyard. And since they don't have private backyards anymore, the Central Park becomes their shared backyard.
It's a trade-off. You're trading private green space for better public green space. The plans also mention an active loop connecting Tisserand Avenue and Taschereau and a civic esplanade with public squares for events and fountains.
Sounds lovely.
It does sound lovely, but I look at this and all I hear is the cash register ringing.
Oh, it is not cheap. Paris-style parks and wide promenades with fountains cost millions.
And that leads us to the economics of it all. Because who pays is always the sticky part of these urban makeovers. The city of Brossard has implemented a development fee that is pretty eye-watering. It's $3,708 per door.
That is the growth tax. It's a really fascinating mechanism. The philosophy behind it is strictly user pay. The logic the city is using is that existing residents of Brossard, the ones who live in the older, established sectors, shouldn't see their property taxes hike to pay for the new sewers and parks of the new residents in the Panama sector.
So if you're Prével and TGTA and you're building 1,776 units, I'm doing the math here, that is over $6.5 million just in fees paid directly to the city.
And that's just the start. Phase A1 alone triggers an initial $1.2 million installment linked right to its launch.
But let's play devil's advocate here for a second. The developer writes the physical check to the city. But who actually pays that $3,708? It gets baked into the condo price, right? The buyer pays it.
Without a doubt, it raises the entry price for housing in that area. However, the counter-argument from the city is that this money is strictly ring-fenced. It goes into a dedicated reserve fund.
Okay.
It pays for that Central Park, which is priority number 1. It pays for the underground upgrades. Because remember, you cannot hook a 30-story skyscraper into a sewer pipe built for a 1980s strip mall.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
And it also pays for what they call the urban signature items.
Which sounds like marketing fluff, I know.
It really does.
But it's actually vital infrastructure.
Yeah.
We were talking about smart lighting, public benches, bike repair stations, art installations, the things that actually make you feel safe and comfortable walking around at night.
So the buyer pays a premium, but the promise is that they aren't just buying a concrete box in the sky. They are buying entry into a fully serviced, high-end neighborhood.
That's the tacit contract of modern density. You pay more, you get less private space, but you get premium public amenities in return.
But does that premium price tag end up creating a ghetto of luxury? I mean, if every single unit has a $4,000 tax baked in, plus sky-high construction costs, are we just building a playground for wealthy professionals?
That is genuinely the biggest risk with these TODs, gentrification and exclusion. To combat that, the urban plan actively mandates a diversity of housing types.
Right.
They want studios for young professionals, larger condo units designed for families, and specific affordable housing options baked into the plan to create genuine neighborhood life.
They have to. Because if the people who work in the coffee shops or the boutiques on the ground floor can't afford to live within 10 miles of the tower, the whole concept of a neighborhood fails.
And it becomes sterile. A real neighborhood needs that mix of incomes and demographics, and ecologically speaking, you need that density to make the environmental math work. The whole point of all of this is to promote electric transit with the REM and walking to reduce the greenhouse gases per capita.
Which brings us to the bridge. The Samuel de Champlain Bridge. Anyone listening who commutes across that bridge knows the absolute pain of it.
The logic there is simple. Every person who lives in the Panama sector and takes the RM downtown is one less solo car on that bridge. It's about decongesting the major regional arteries.
But here is where the story actually flips, and this is the part I found most compelling in the research from the sources. We always talk about the suburbs as bedroom communities.
Right.
You sleep there, you commute to the city to work. But the REM is creating a phenomenon that I don't think enough people are talking about, which is the reverse commute.
This is the economic game changer, the north to south flow.
It's weird to think about, right? Someone living in the Plateau or Griffintown in Montreal commuting to Brossard for work.
It feels completely counterintuitive historically, but look at the demographics right now. Montreal has a massive talent pool. University students, recent immigrants, Gen Z tech workers, and a huge portion of them do not own cars. They literally cannot work in Brossard right now because the bus service is too sporadic or the corporate office parks are surrounded by literal moats of parking.
So Brossard employers have essentially been cut off from a talent pool of, what, over 2 million people?
Exactly. But now with the REM, Panama Station becomes the front door for that talent. You can live in a car-free apartment in Montreal and get to a job in Brossard in under 15 minutes. It's faster than crossing the city itself.
And we're already seeing corporate strategies shift because of this.
Yeah.
Employers are moving to the Panama area specifically for recruitment.
Recruitment and retention. If you're a video game studio or a tech firm, you want that young talent. If you tell them, hey, come work for us, but you need to buy a Honda Civic, pay for insurance, and sit in traffic for 45 minutes, they just say no.
Yeah, they go work somewhere else.
But if you say, we are right off the REM, 15 minutes from your apartment, you get the hire. Better work-life balance, less commute stress.
It's fascinating. The transit link makes the suburb a viable economic hub, not just a dormitory. And there's another signal in the reports that the car culture is really dying here. The paid parking effect.
This is the end of an era. For decades, the defining feature of any suburb was free parking. It was an absolute given.
You just expected it.
But land value in a TOD is too high. You simply cannot afford to let 200 square feet of prime real estate sit there covered in asphalt for free.
So employers are starting to charge for parking, or they are just converting that expensive parking land into profitable office space.
Which forces the behavior change. And to sweeten the deal, some companies are now considering offering OPUS cards transit passes as a perk instead of a parking spot.
That is such a massive cultural shift. The company car is basically becoming the company OPUS card.
It appeals directly to a younger generation that is increasingly uninterested in the expense and the hassle of car ownership. It's cheaper for the company to provide, it's cheaper for the employee, and obviously better for the planet.
Before we wrap up the physical transformation aspect, we should mention that Prével and TGTA aren't the only players looking at this. First Capital is sitting right there too.
The owners of Mail Champlain, yes. They are watching this Panama project very closely.
Because they own massive amounts of parking lot space adjacent to this whole area.
Right now, they are a strategic landowner seeing how Phase A1 goes. But their long-term plan is to do exactly the same thing. Redevelop those vast parking lots into mixed-use developments. So what we are seeing now with this 130-story tower, it's really just the first domino to fall.
So let's pull back and look at the big picture of what we've covered today. We are witnessing the end of the sea of asphalt. We're seeing a 30-story mixed-use hub rise up, funded by a user-pay growth tax system and anchored by a central park inspired by Parisian reclamation projects.
And ultimately, we are seeing the suburbs grow up, they are densifying, they are becoming diverse, and they are becoming economic engines in their own right, rather than just appendages to the metropolis.
It's proof that suburbs can become urban without losing their appeal, as long as the design is right.
That's the key. The
Yes.
design has to support that tacit contract we talked about. Smaller private spaces exchanged for really high-quality public spaces.
It brings me to a final thought for you to chew on. We've spent the last 70 years defining our lives by the commute. You live here in the quiet, you work there in the action.
Right.
But if Brossard has 30-story towers, major corporate headquarters, and vibrant public squares, and if the trains run both ways every few minutes, does the concept of a bedroom community even exist anymore?
That is the real question for the next decade. Are we moving toward a future where there is no center and periphery, but just a continuous network of microcities?
A network of nodes. It's a fascinating thought to mull over the next time you're tapping your OPUS card to head off the island. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the transformation of the Panama sector.
Always a pleasure to be here.
See you on the next one.